Hey, my name is Matt. Now, I'd like to ask you, does it sometimes happen that you ask yourself, why didn't I see that? I had it just in front of my eyes. Maybe I see a nod. Someone, I think it's fairly human. I guess you've been there. Maybe, could be a relationship you should have left, or a job you should have quit or taken, a place you should have moved away from. Or in a more professional context, something that you and your colleagues didn't notice that your competitors did, that made you miss out an opportunity or something. And it's funny because when you suddenly get that insight, it's as if it's so clear. Again, I mean, how couldn't I see it? I had it just in front of my eyes. It comes from a gut feeling or from your heart or whatever. And I actually had this feeling myself recently. I read this wonderful book by Japanese author Murakami. It's called Norwegian Wood. And suddenly, unexpectedly, in the middle of the book, I came to this small passage with a few phrases that somehow connected to an aspect of myself that I disregarded for so many years. And it hit me, boom. It stayed with me for months and maybe longer even. So, I mean, maybe in the private context, it's good that these things take time because they need to mature. You need to understand certain things over time. But in a professional context, you might ask yourself, couldn't there be a way to see things a little bit earlier so that we don't miss out these opportunities and try to have a more clear-sighted understanding earlier in the situation? And there are a few methods. I will come to those later. But for now, I think we can just agree that this AI moment is one of those moments where we would like to see and understand what things are happening and where they lead us, and not coming back and say, why didn't we see that? We had it just in front of our eyes. And yet, I believe that we're going to do precisely that. I'm fairly certain. This situation is so new, it's so kind of dynamic, that even the smartest people that I talk to, that I read about, they grapple for finding an understanding of where we're heading. Really, I think the most spot-on comment that I've seen is someone has said, well, pretty radical uncertainty. I think that nails it. Yet I think that there are some things that we can understand about this. But before we look into the future, I'd like to put this into perspective and look back, way back. Let's say 3 billion years to the beginning of life, right? So this is present time. Let's take 3 steps. 1, 2, 3 for each billion years. This is where life started on Earth. Well, Earth is about 5 billion years old, so that would be another 2 meters, and Big Bang is another 10 meters that way, 15 billion years ago. Okay, there we got the setting. So life started, just jump ahead immediately 2 billion years. Again, back again. That's the time it took life to go from monocellular life to multicellular life, from prokaryotes to eukaryotes. It's difficult to get your head around that. 2 billion years, I would say that's a pretty slow starter, right? But that's actually the time it took. Let's skip ahead again. Like going over here, staying 0.5 millimeter from present time, a few hundred years ago, that's where Homo sapiens came around. But where I'm aiming is 600 years ago, which would be 0.5 thousandth of a millimeter, 100th of a piece of hair. That's in the 15th century when Gutenberg invented the printing press. Arguably, maybe the most important invention of our time, our modern history. That's what most people actually say. Now, obviously, a fantastic innovation that made it possible to print books instead of making them by hand. And in that way, they didn't cost a fortune, which they did when you made them by hand. You could actually have books accessible for anyone. So yeah, a great invention. But do you think that Gutenberg had any idea about all the stories and tales and ideas and streamings and thoughts that would flow through his innovation over the coming centuries? No way. Did he have an idea about the influence that this invention would have on our society in different ways, laying the ground for the scientific revolution and for a global news distribution network and many other things? Probably not. So let that sink in. And let's take another example. We're going to move another 500 years ahead. That would be, well, 75 years ago, that would be a thousandth of a piece of hair. 75 years ago, in the 1940s, 3 researchers in the Bell's laboratory were inventing the first semiconductor transistor. Again, great invention, incredibly important for everything that we have today. But do you think that these researchers had any idea, first of all, that we would be able, 75 years later, to pack 100 billion transistors onto one microchip, that we do microchips that we have in our ordinary digital devices? Or obviously, they wouldn't have been able to imagine all the possibilities that would come out of digital technologies, such as all the connections that we have through internet, social networks, with e-commerce, or streaming media, or for that matter, cyber criminality and disinformation and lies and trolls and cyber wars. Yeah, all that. Probably not. So again, that sink in. And the conclusion is that what really changes the world are not popes and kings and presidents and wars and revolutions. What changes the world is technology, innovations. But what makes it magical is people. Because without people, the printing press without people, or the transistor without people. And this is the dynamic that we have. We have technology, we have people, and we have a problem. And everyone has their own problem. They're solving their problem. That's what the brain does. It solves problems. And we've got billions of brains, and it's difficult to understand the sum of all the problems that we're solving every day. So that makes it difficult to see the interplay. On the other hand, we have some common idea of problems that are most important to us right now, like the global warming, the climate crisis. So that gives us a kind of a direction. But this is the difficulty of looking ahead, to see this interplay of technology that makes things possible and changes the conditions for everything, and people using it, billions of people, and the problems that we want to solve. And yet, this is where we need to look to understand how we can look ahead. So where does AI fit into this? If we look at those important inventions like the printing press and the transistor. Before we answer that, let's look at digital technologies in general. So, in what way did digital technologies change the way we do things, like the printing press did, making the book accessible to anyone? Well, the answer is that digital technologies have made 3 amazing things really, really cheap. Okay, 3 amazing things. Let's see. The first thing is the digital machine itself, which is doing automation. We did automation before in history, but that was mechanical automation, where you needed a specific device for every task. This is a multi-purpose automation machine. You just change the software. It can do anything from image processing when you watch Netflix, to driving a car, or driving a ship, or an aircraft, or now even writing texts and making pictures, images, or computer code. And it does it cheap. Because thanks to Moore's law, the cost of CPU power has been approaching 0. So that is the first thing. Cheap automation. Next thing is you can copy it. You can copy it in storage, because the cost of copy, digital copy, and the cost of storage has also approached the 0. That's completely new. We didn't do that. We needed to pay for material and for labor cost. Now, this is completely different. And this started already to change the dynamics of different businesses. And then you add to that, you can reach the world with one click, because the cost of transmission through the network is also very, very low, approaching 0. Now, we couldn't do that before. We could reach the world with the telephone networks, but only with voice calls. Facts. Well, but voice calls, they weren't cheap. I don't know about you, but when I went to France, I was 18 years old in the beginning of the 80s. I stayed there for 6 months. How many times do you think I called home? Well, twice, 3 times, 4 times maybe. Putting in another coin. I didn't eat for a week. That was expensive to calling home. And on the other hand, we were free when we were traveling. We didn't know about other people. It was kind of a different feeling to travel those days. Whatever. So, and radio and television can reach the world, but only in one direction. Internet, digital networks, two direction, and it's very low cost. So we have these three things, the automation, the copying, and reaching the world. So what will AI add to this? What will become really, really cheap with AI, which will change this picture? Let me come to that. But first, before we go ahead, let me come to the question about what we feel about this AI moment, that many of you have already touched upon it. It's obvious that it's something that touches us. It has become a public awareness in a way that it hasn't before. So people are worried, people are warning about the consequences. I think you might have noticed that Elon Musk and another 1,000 people signed an open letter asking for a 6 months pause for developing AI systems stronger than GPT-4 in the last few days. I personally think it's a bad idea, but that's another question. No, but some people are warning about the consequences. Other people are really enthusiastic. And you can be both, actually. So let me hear about you. Now, how many of you are worried about AI? Hands up. A few hands. Oh, yeah. And how many of you are enthusiastic about AI? Well, a few hands, not so many more. Well, let me ask again, how many of you are worried about AI? Because you can't change your mind. There are a few more hands. So, you can actually be both. And I'm both worried and enthusiastic. And I think, because again, this uncertainty is very large. But the first thing to do is to sort out what AI is and what it isn't. And I usually say that, AI is, of today, incredibly capable of copying human behavior, even complex human behavior, as we've seen, writing texts, making images and videos, incredibly capable. But when you knock the door, there's no one home. That is the big difference. You might have started to ask yourself if maybe there is someone home when you've seen the latest developments of AI, but there is no one home. This big difference is our self-awareness, this magical thing that science still doesn't know how to explain how it works, let alone be able to reproduce it. Our self-awareness, our capability of subjective experiences of colors, of the blue sky, of the smell of flowers, of the taste of strawberries, the feeling of the wind in your hair, on your skin, the voice of your friend, the feeling of warmness, of happiness inside, or of worry, or anticipation, or imagination that you long for something. All these things, the subjective experience that actually doesn't even exist in the physical world, because redness doesn't exist. And the sound of the violin doesn't exist in the physical world. That's something we have in here. And that's particular. And that's the one thing. The other thing is our ability to be a person, having a feeling that we are a person over time. Through time, we're one single individual person, which makes it possible for us to form relationships with other people, to ask ourselves questions about causes and consequences, which in turn makes us able to think about ethics and moral and things like that, which is very different. Now, AI can make reasoning, you've seen that probably, discussions, texts about balanced discussions about moral and ethics and stuff like that, but it's just the shell of that discussion. There is no thought inside, there is no experience of this inside. I think the closest thing we can come to this is, you've probably been in that situation when you suddenly stand in front of or your fridge or in front of the door of your work and you don't know how you came there? Kind of automatic. And that would be something similar, maybe an automatic process that you do, but you're not aware of it. And still, you can suddenly be aware of it. The AI is not. So that is the big difference. And I would say that is also obviously where the basis for all the risks that we see with AI about responsibility, about ethics and moral and all those things that we are discussing today. They are very important discussions because the AI can't do anything of this, which we can. So we need to be there and balance it. So I think the first thing out of this that you need to tell yourself, specifically if you're worried, but in all contexts, is if you focus on what you do, then an AI will do that too. But if you focus on what you are, who you are, an AI will not come close. So this is my first thing that I think we need to think about. Focus on what you are. Now then you can be worried about AI coming for your job. Most people are, many people are actually. And again, I would say, first of all, technology rarely, very rarely displaces jobs, entire jobs. Maybe the elevator operator was one of those jobs that was displaced by technology. But normally, technology takes away tasks in a job. So you can immediately ask yourself, which thing in my work could I gladly let a machine do for me? Can I come up with a few things? I don't think it would be difficult. Some people tell me that, well, for example, I'd like to let a machine do the phone calls for me. I don't like phone calls. Or clean up in the kitchen. Well, I'm sorry, robots are still a little bit ahead. That's difficult, yeah, dexterity. But I think that most of you can immediately find things that you would like a machine do for you to save time. So use AI to free your time. It's a colleague, it's a capable colleague that could do lots of stuff that would make it possible for you to focus on things that are more interesting and more difficult. For example, in PostTrade, there are lots of stuff, most probably that you feel that only you as a human with human experience can understand all the different aspects of regulations, for example, and compliance, or communication with clients in a situation of conflict, or being creative in different aspects of settlements in the PostTrade situation. I'm sure of that. So let the AI do the boring work. That you only takes away your time. And then you might be worried that the AI might come for your creative part. Now they seem to be creative, these machines, lately. Okay? Well, actually, maybe they are. If you talk to artists working with AI today, with these generative AI systems, they tell me that, yeah, they're kind of creative. And if you look at it closer, you see that the creative part of these AI systems is about the random generator, because they don't have any imagination. They can't imagine anything at all. So in order to have a different output every time you put in the same prompt, they need a random number generator. And that random number generator takes it off in different directions that to you might seem creative, because it goes out of the box of the beaten track that most of us normally fall into. Similar ideas every day, right? And that random number can open up your eyes. So it's an eye-opener. It's a creative partner that can help you being more creative. Use it to open your eyes. And another thing about creativity is this. If you think about the elevator operator, the task, that description of that task is very closed. It's this, and you can automate that. But creativity is different. If you automate anything creative that I do, I just invent something else on top of that. Because creativity has no upper limit at all. So you just create on top. So that makes AI the creative partner that is particular, that can help you find new ideas and work together with you. So these are three things in which you could think about AI. And then let's come back to the question about what will AI make really, really cheap? And here's the thing. Those AI systems we see today, they're looking for patterns. And one of the most consistent patterns that you find out there in the data is computer code. And before thinking about that, remember also that this is what AI is trained on. It's trained on text, on images, on code. And if you think about yourself again, I thought I was talking about you thinking about yourself, who you are. All the inner experiences that you have, there is no data about that. So machines can't learn about your inner subjective experience and all that which is human. They can never learn that. They can learn about our expressions. But they can learn about computer code, because that's one of the most consistent data that is out there, because it's always following strictly the grammar of computer languages. And that's why current AI systems are so good at starting to construct code. It's just small pieces of code so far, but they do it very well, and they find errors, and they can help you explain the errors and help you on the way. So this is what's going to happen. If you think again about the digital landscape, about CPU power, which is cheap, copying and storage, which is cheap, and distribution, which is cheap, software is still expensive because it's made by humans. But the cost of software will go down. And I don't mean that programmers will be out of business, that they're going to lose their jobs, because there is still so much code to be written. The big difference here is that everyone will have access to coding. You already have. You can already make very simple programs by talking to ChatGPT. But this is just the start. It's going to be so natural to have software made at the moment that we're going to talk about software as water from a tap. Software as tap water. You're going to be able to just build it, waste it, dispose of it in order to communicate with other machines. Now, where this will lead us, that is really difficult to say. It depends on, over time, again, how billions of people will use this, and that's very difficult to understand. Well, we can at least have some fantasies, some ideas. Maybe it's going to be easier to communicate with machines for anyone. Let's say I need to troubleshoot my dishwasher. You know how it is. It's broken down. I need to call a technician. He will have you pay $200 just to come and look at it. It's not worth it. You throw it away and you buy a new one. Maybe you could just talk to it. Maybe your device can help you build the code to talk to the microprocessor and troubleshoot it. So we have an increased sustainability in technology. Talk to machines and ask them how much carbon dioxide they produce. Ask them anything else. And machines talk to machines. So these are just ideas. But this is maybe the direction we're going when we're going to have software as tap water. This is one of the less discussed topics, actually, but maybe it will be one of those who play out over time to have a big significance, a big consequence. So, if you think about all of this, now let's come back again. If we don't know what this will mean, I think actually that we're going to look back and say, why didn't we see that? Why didn't we see that? We had it just in front of our eyes. But I said about a few things that you can do, at least to try to see things better. And I got to say 5 of them, 5 things that you can actually do. It's not that complicated, but 5 things that you can do to increase your ability to try to see what's happening around you. First, of course, is being curious. Curious about what's happening around us right now. Second, networking. Network with other people, because diversity of ideas always helps. So network. 3, learn every day. Try to learn new things about these things. Whatever little thing that you can learn is a step ahead. 4, take risks. I don't know, in this room, maybe risk is not a good word, but take small risks. Not too big, not too small. A small risk, that's not that dangerous, because you can learn from it. And 5, reflect on what you see. Reflect on what you see when you're curious, when you talk, network with other people, when you learn, when you take that risk and maybe you fail. Reflect on it. Those 5 things will help you to increase the possibility to see what will happen. But I think we will come back again and say, why didn't we see that? And as a side note, Remember now, people start yelling that, oh, the pace of change is increasing. Everyone needs to be agile and disruptive. Everyone needs to be up there at the highest pace of change. I don't agree. We are different as persons. And we need to be different. Some people love to be at the forefront, at the cutting edge of the new technology and try it and see where it leads them, no matter if it breaks the business model and the whole company. And other people love to stay and doing business as usual and refine it. We need both, because you can't be only flexible or only in the shape where we always used to be. So that's the challenge of leadership. Leaders need to understand that we need both of these types of persons, and you need to be the person that you are, but still you can try to focus on who you are. See the AI as a possibility to free up your time, make it your creative partner, and be curious about this fact that actually software is going to be accessible to anyone, like tap water. It might be the parallel to the Gutenberg thing, that suddenly everyone can have access to software and software production as anyone had, I guess, access to books. And above all, remember that technology changes that world, but what makes it magical are people. Thank you.